started as just another Wednesday. I was off work early. One of those rare quiet afternoons where the sun hits just right and the world feels tolerable. Amy had texted me during lunch asking if I could pick her up from the medical certification center. She was finishing some urgent care training modules, nothing unusual. I said sure. I liked being useful. I liked showing up for her. She didn't know I was already parked when she messaged again saying, "Almost done. 10 minutes red heart." I was a little early, not on purpose. I just didn't feel like going home to an empty place. I sat in my car, parked just off the main walkway, engine off, scrolling mindlessly through emails. It should have been just another routine errand in our shared life. But then I looked up. The front of the certification center had big paneled windows, the kind meant to let in natural light for the lounge area inside. Through the glass, I saw her. She was standing close, too close, to a man in a white coat. His back was half turned to me, but even from that angle I could tell he was tall, well-kept, confident in the way he held himself. She had that look on her face, the one that wasn't quite a smile, but something softer. She leaned in as he said something, and then he laughed, and she laughed, and for a moment they looked like the only two people in that entire building. Then his hand rested on her lower back. I don't know how long it stayed there. Maybe 3 seconds. Maybe 5. But it didn't matter. It was long enough. It wasn't a friendly tap. It wasn't the kind of brief contact people make in passing. No, it was firm, lingering, the kind of touch you give when you're staking quiet claims. And worse, she didn't flinch. She didn't move away. In fact, she stepped slightly closer, like she was used to it. I felt a cold tightness bloom in my chest. That instinctive jolt, the one you try to rationalize away. I told myself I was being dramatic. That it was probably just a mentor-mentee moment taken out of context. I mean, this was Amy. My Amy. We'd been together for 6 years, married for 2. We shared Spotify playlists and Amazon passwords and inside jokes no one else understood. She wasn't someone who cheated. We weren't the type of couple that even made space for that kind of betrayal, right? A few minutes later, she stepped out of the building, squinting into the sun, walking with that same casual gait she always had. She didn't look around to check if I'd seen anything. She didn't seem nervous. If anything, she looked at ease, relaxed, like someone who had just been told a funny story or finished something satisfying. She slid into the passenger seat and smiled at me. "Thanks for the pickup, babe. That place is a maze." I nodded, started the car. "No problem. Everything go okay?" "Yeah," she said quickly, too quickly. Dr. Keller was giving me some pointers on the triage module. He's super passionate about protocols. You know, textbook perfectionist type. Her tone was even. Not defensive, not emotional. Just polished. As if she'd anticipated the question and already rehearsed the answer. There was a subtle shift in her voice. One I couldn't quite place. Like she'd been practicing small lies for a while and had finally gotten good at it. She looked down at her phone, swiped through something, then glanced back up. "Want to grab takeout on the way home?" I nodded again, but my head was somewhere else entirely. I kept thinking about the placement of his hand. The way their heads tilted inward like they were sharing something private. The absence of distance between them. And more than anything, the way she hadn't hesitated. I didn't confront her. Didn't ask any pointed questions. But something quiet and awful shifted in me on that short drive home. Not anger, not heartbreak. Not yet. Just a strange silence. Like part of me had suddenly gone offline, watching her from behind glass. Something that had always felt certain started to feel unsteady, and I didn't know how to stop that feeling from spreading. That night, she hummed while reheating leftover curry and asked if I wanted wine. We sat on the couch like we usually did, watched a show we both liked but didn't love, and she laughed in the right places and leaned against me halfway through. If I hadn't seen that moment in the window, I might have thought everything was perfectly fine. But I had seen it, and now I couldn't unsee it. It's funny how fast just a feeling turns into a full-blown suspicion once you start noticing the little things. It began with her phone, of course it did. Before, she used to leave it lying around without a second thought. She never had a lock on it, and I never felt the need to snoop. But then one evening, maybe a week after the parking lot incident, I picked it up to move it off the kitchen counter while we were cleaning up after dinner. The screen lit up. Instead of her usual open layout, it asked for a passcode. New password? I asked casually. She glanced over from the sink, barely pausing. Yeah, new policy at the clinic. HIPAA stuff. Patient confidentiality. You know. She rinsed a dish and kept talking, but I'd stopped listening. Something about the way she said it, the too casual tone, the avoidance of eye contact. It didn't feel like truth. It felt like a cover story dressed in just enough reality to be passable. And suddenly, her phone wasn't just a phone anymore, it was a locked door. From there, the pattern began to take shape. She bought new lingerie pieces I'd never seen before. Not the kind of cute, cheeky stuff she used to wear for fun on weekends. These were different. More deliberate. Silk, lace, and straps with tags still attached. I found one set tucked deep in her sock drawer, still in the packaging. When I asked about it, half joking, half testing, she waved it off and said she'd ordered it during a sale. Impulse buy, she shrugged. You'll see it eventually. But I never did. Then there was the perfume. She'd always had sensitive sinuses. Floral scents used to give her headaches. I remember once she had to leave a movie theater early because the woman next to her was wearing too much vanilla musk. Now suddenly she was spritzing herself before work with something heady and unfamiliar, rich and spicy, the kind of scent that lingered long after she'd left the room. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off. Oh, this one doesn't bother me. The others were worse. You know how brands change their formulas. Again, smooth, practiced, just plausible enough. It escalated slowly. Not in dramatic ways, there were no lipstick-stained collars or mysterious hotel receipts, but in subtleties. A late shift here, a training seminar there. Nights when she'd come home hours after she was supposed to, claiming she'd stayed behind to help a struggling classmate or finish up paperwork. Always with an explanation. Always believable, just barely. But what gnawed at me the most was how she came back. She used to come home from work exhausted, crashing onto the couch with her shoes still on, asking for takeout because she was too tired to cook. Yeah? She walked in energized, her eyes bright, her posture light. She'd hum while putting her things away, ask me how my day was with this strange, almost guilty sweetness. As if overcompensating. And that smile, God, that smile. It was polite. Controlled. The kind of smile you give someone you used to love, maybe still care for, but not the kind you give your partner when everything's right. One night, I was digging through her bag looking for the grocery list she said she scribbled down. I unzipped the front pocket and there it was. A stick of men's deodorant. Unopened. New. I stared at it, heart suddenly pounding in my ears. When she came into the room and saw me holding it, she didn't even flinch. Oh, that, she said with a laugh. It's for my brother. He's allergic to most brands, and I remembered he said he wanted to try that one. Figured I'd pick it up. Except her brother was allergic to deodorants, especially scented ones. It was a whole thing. I remembered her ranting about how he had to make his own with baking soda and essential oils. But she said it so smoothly, like she'd been ready for the question before it even came out of my mouth. That was the moment I realized she'd started preparing her lies. And then the laptop. Her laptop used to live on the kitchen counter. It was where we planned vacations, ordered groceries, watched dumb YouTube videos together late at night. Then, almost overnight, it became her constant companion. She carried it from room to room, kept it shut tight unless she was alone. Even took it into the bathroom, claiming she was catching up on modules during her baths. When I teased her about taking work into the tub, she didn't laugh. She just shrugged and said, gotta stay ahead. But it wasn't just the laptop. It was everything. Her routines shifted. She stopped telling me small things, how her day went, who said what during lunch, what patients she saw. Her stories started sounding like recaps she'd written on cue cards. Too tidy. Sanitized. And then there were the silences. At first, I thought I was imagining it. That I was being paranoid. That I was projecting some insecurity onto her. I mean, we were married. We had routines. Ruts even. It's normal for things to lose their spark a little. But no, this wasn't that. This was different. She was different. I started noticing the way she touched her phone the second it buzzed, always tilting it away from me. How she excused herself during dinner to check something and came back 5 minutes later, her expression changed, like she'd been somewhere I wasn't allowed to follow. And I started noticing how I felt around her. Like a guest in my own marriage. Like I was watching someone play the role of my wife, but not quite hitting the mark. One night, while she was asleep, I just sat at the edge of the bed and stared at her. Her face was relaxed, peaceful. She looked like the woman I'd married. But lying there, next to her, I felt a million miles away. I thought about the man in the white coat. Dr. Keller? I thought about how she mentioned his name twice since that day, always casually, always in passing. I didn't even know his first name. He wasn't just a coworker. He wasn't nothing. And I kept going back to that damn touch. His hand on her back. The way she didn't flinch. The worst part wasn't that I suspected something was happening. It was that I was starting to believe something already had. I don't know what finally pushed me to act. Maybe it was the deodorant. Or the way she smiled at nothing while stirring her coffee that morning. Maybe it was all of it, the weight of weeks pressing on my chest, each suspicion building like bricks around my ability to breathe. What I do know is that on a rainy Sunday afternoon, while Amy was at SK*LLS lab that ran long, I pulled the old iPad out from the back of the hall closet. We hadn't used it in months, maybe years. But I remembered it was still logged into her iCloud. She'd set it up back when we were syncing calendars, trying to coordinate dinner nights and her class schedule. Back when everything still felt shared. It was dead, of course. I plugged it in, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. When it powered on, I felt that immediate rush of guilt. Like I was doing something wrong. Like I was invading her privacy. But that guilt was quickly smothered by something colder, something that had learned to stop trusting long before I touched the screen. Photos started syncing first. Then audio files. Most were lecture notes, voice memos for school. But one caught my eye. Its name was just a date and time, nothing else. It was created late one Thursday night, during one of her extended shifts. I pressed play. At first, it was muffled, some kind of ambient sound, rustling fabric maybe. Then laughter. Her laughter. That familiar, full laugh she hadn't shared with me in weeks. The sound hit me like a slap. Then a male voice, deep and smooth, same room next time? Her laugh again. Of course. You booked it under my maiden name, right? Always. Silence, then a whisper. I wish we had more than just 2 nights. 2 nights. I stopped the recording. I couldn't listen anymore. My stomach turned. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It wasn't intuition. It was proof. The next day, while she was at class, I called the hotel. The name she'd used, her maiden name, was easy to remember. It was printed on some of our old mail that I kept in a drawer. I used it pretending to be her assistant. Said I needed to confirm a reservation at the Lakeside Inn for a conference stay. Yes, the front desk clerk said after a pause. 2 nights, checking in this Thursday. Under her maiden name. That was all I needed. Thursday came fast. I told her I had a late meeting and wouldn't be home until after 10. She nodded, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Don't work too hard." She wore her new perfume. I waited until she left, then got in the car and drove. The hotel was about 45 minutes outside of town, tucked near a lake with just enough privacy to stay off the radar. I'd never been there, but I knew the kind of people who went. People like her. People with something to hide. I got to the front desk, said I was picking up a left item for my sister, gave them her maiden name, and played nervous but charming. The woman behind the counter looked tired, disinterested. She told me the room number, handed me a keycard without question. Room 214. 2nd floor. Lakeside view. I didn't go in. I couldn't. I wasn't there to confront. I wasn't there to scream or cry or make a scene. I just needed to see it. I needed the truth to punch me in the gut so hard that there would be no more doubt left in me to argue with later. I walked up the stairs. The hallway was quiet, the carpet soft under my shoes. The door to 214 was cracked open. Just slightly. Just enough. I stood at the corner where the hall bent and waited. And then I saw her. Amy. In a white hotel robe. Her hair still damp, laughing softly. Holding a wine glass. And him. Dr. Keller. He was shirtless, his posture relaxed, confident. Comfortable. Like someone who had done this before. He stepped behind her and kissed her shoulder. She didn't pull away. They were comfortable. I watched them for exactly 8 seconds. Long enough for it to be seared into my memory. Long enough for the doubt to die quietly in my chest. Then I turned, walked back down the stairs, and left. They never saw me. Back in my car, I sat with my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles hurt. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, listening to the soft tick of the engine cooling down and the rain tapping the windshield like a metronome for something slow and breaking. She wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she hadn't been for a while. But now it was undeniable. Now it had form. Now it had a name, a face, a room number. On the drive home, I planned everything. Not revenge. Not yet. But control. I wasn't going to fall apart. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to let her see me unravel. She had made her choices in silence. So I would answer in kind. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had already decided. I would dismantle this carefully. Quietly. I wouldn't be the man screaming on the porch. I'd be the man she'd never see coming. Let her think I was still blind. Let her come home smelling like another man's skin and call it a long shift. I'd give her the illusion, and then I'd take everything else. I didn't sleep that night. Not from heartbreak, not from grief, just a kind of awakening. Like my mind had shifted into a new gear. I lay in bed beside her as she breathed steadily, unaware. She smelled faintly of wine and that same perfume I now associated with betrayal. I stared at the ceiling and began planning. By morning, the plan had a pulse. I started with the financials. We had a shared account we used for bills, savings, and household expenses. I left it untouched, for now. But I quietly opened a new account under my name alone, rerouted my direct deposit, and started funneling anything I could into it. Bonuses, reimbursements, freelance gigs I hadn't even told her I picked up. I called the credit card company, requested separate statements. I changed the password on our online banking login, citing security updates. She didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't ask. Next came the digital space. Our cloud folders, the ones we shared for grocery lists and vacation planning, were filled with innocuous things. But buried deeper, like all things Amy-related, were documents with scans of pay stubs, contracts, expense reports. She'd once linked her work documents there by mistake. I remembered. I re-accessed them. That's when I saw it. Overtime reports filed on nights she was supposedly home early. Pay increases retroactively applied for shifts she claimed she'd turned down because she didn't want to be away from me too much. And the kicker? A few internal memos between her and the clinic's assistant director, Dr. Keller, praising extra time volunteered to off-site development. Off-site? That hotel, maybe? The location was never mentioned, but the pattern was clear. She'd been getting paid to cheat. Not metaphorically. Literally. I **T everything. Downloaded files. Created folders titled innocuously, Taxes 2025, Mortgage Docs, Health Receipts. Then I encrypted them. Uploaded backups to external drives and cloud services she didn't know about. I was building a dossier, and every time I uncovered a new thread, I pulled. Then came the ethics board tip. Amy worked for a reputable urgent care center with a strict no-fraternization policy, especially between supervisors and trainees. I didn't want to leave a trail, so I used a public computer in the library across town. I created a throwaway email address, drafted a message with calm, clinical language, and attached the anonymized evidence. I didn't use names, just positions, dates, times, and the **TS. I knew enough about policy jargon to make it sound legitimate. A few days later, her assistant resigned. No explanation, just a curt message in Amy's email preview that she opened in front of me at dinner. I won't be coming in anymore. I'm sorry. She stared at her screen for a while, then locked it and excused herself to the bedroom. I didn't ask what was wrong. She began to unravel in small, subtle ways. Her phone was always in her hand, even more so now, but she wasn't texting as much. More staring. More silence. Sometimes she'd go to call someone and stop midway. I caught her once sitting at the edge of the bed, phone to her ear, not saying anything, listening, waiting. Eventually, she hung up without a word. Meanwhile, I acted as if nothing was wrong. I cooked dinner. I made weekend plans. I even suggested we go hiking, something she used to love. She declined, said she had to catch up on modules. I just nodded. She didn't notice I'd already removed her access to our shared streaming accounts, changed passwords on Spotify, Netflix, Amazon, every small comfort she once took for granted. She asked once, mid-scroll, why her login wasn't working. I shrugged. Weird. I'll check later. She didn't ask again. She didn't notice the locks on our joint savings had changed either. The mobile alerts had been rerouted. She no longer received them. She couldn't see what I was doing. I kept the routine airtight. On the surface, I was the same husband I'd always been, predictable, kind, present. But underneath, I was dismantling her world piece by piece, like a mechanic pulling screws from a plane mid-flight, waiting to see when it would start to fall. And it did. She came home late one evening, eyes wide and red. Dropped her bag harder than usual. Didn't say a word. Just stood in the kitchen, staring at the counter. "You okay?" I asked. She blinked. "Yeah. Just tired." She cooked that night, burned the chicken. Didn't eat. The next day, I received a confirmation email. The ethics board had opened an internal inquiry into her department. No names. No details. Just a formal note acknowledging the tip and thanking the concerned party for coming forward. Amy didn't know yet, but she felt it. I watched her one morning staring at her phone with a clenched jaw. Her hands trembled as she typed. She deleted the message. Started again. Deleted again. She stopped humming around the house. Stopped wearing her perfume. Her new lingerie, still hidden in the sock drawer, hadn't moved. She stopped calling me babe. And I kept playing my part. Sometimes she'd try to reach across the distance, ask me to watch something with her, suggest a walk. I'd say yes. Every time. But I gave her nothing. Just enough warmth to avoid suspicion, just enough presence to be invisible in plain sight. She didn't know I had an exit plan. I'd contacted an attorney, outlined everything. The digital evidence. The emotional distance. The financial details. I wasn't interested in a fight, I wanted control. Quiet, clean, irreversible control. Amy thought she was still in charge. That I was still in the dark. That she could manage this mess before it spilled over. But I had already rearranged the chessboard. She just hadn't realized the game had changed. At first, she tried to pretend nothing had changed. She still made the bed in the morning, folded my laundry neatly, and greeted me at the door with that same soft, "Hey, babe," as if it hadn't started to ring hollow weeks ago. But the mask was starting to slip, and not in the ways you might expect. It was the little things. The way she'd flinch slightly when the doorbell rang, or how she started checking the mail before I could. How she'd hover near her phone like a lifeline, but rarely sent messages anymore. Like she was waiting, not reaching. Her eyes, once so expressive, now darted during silences. I'd ask how her day went, and she'd respond too quickly, too brightly, like she was reading a line she didn't believe in. And yet I never accused her. Never raised my voice. Never even hinted at what I knew. I smiled. I listened. I offered her the exact same kindness she once offered me, except now it was clinical, detached. Sterile. She didn't notice it at first. Or maybe she did and just hoped it was her imagination. But I watched it land. The way she started second-guessing herself mid-sentence. The way her hands trembled slightly when she chopped vegetables, or how she'd forget what she was saying and then laugh it off, except it wasn't funny. She was fraying strand by strand. I had become a mirror. Still, quiet, and unforgiving. One night, she brought home takeout, our usual, from a Thai place we'd frequented during our early dating years. She even remembered to ask for the peanut sauce I liked, which she'd been forgetting for months. She placed the containers on the table, lit a candle, and smiled across the flickering flame. "Thought we could use a little date night," she said, almost hopefully. I nodded, opened the box, and took a bite. It tasted like it always had. But somehow it felt like I was chewing through memory instead of food. I watched her across the table. She picked at her food, eyes flicking to me and then away, like she was waiting for a verdict. "It's good," I said. Just that. Her smile faltered, then tightened. After dinner, she tried again. She curled up next to me on the couch, head on my shoulder. For a moment, it almost felt real, until I realized her hand was shaking. "Do you remember when we came here the first time?" she asked quietly. "To the apartment?" She nodded. "We couldn't afford a couch, so we sat on those crates. And you made the dumb joke about how it was urban rustic." I laughed once, short, dry. "Yeah. You hated it." She smiled. But her eyes didn't. "No, I didn't. And that was it." She waited like she wanted more. I didn't offer it. She stayed quiet the rest of the night. Her behavior grew more erratic after that. She'd come home with grocery bags she hadn't mentioned, buying random stuff we didn't need. More wine than usual. Bath bombs. A fancy olive oil brand we never splurged on. It felt like bribery, though she'd never call it that. She was trying to recreate something that had already left the room. She suggested a weekend trip. "Just us," she said, eyes wide, voice hopeful. "Maybe the coast. A reset." I told her I was busy with a project. I didn't say what kind. The next day, she started crying in the kitchen. I walked in and found her standing over the sink, tears spilling silently down her face, hands still wet from washing dishes. "What's wrong?" I asked, calmly. She looked up like I'd caught her in something shameful. She shook her head, wiped her face with a dish towel. "Nothing. Just tired." She was always tired now, but never enough to sleep. I knew she stayed up after I went to bed. I'd wake in the middle of the night and see the faint glow of her phone, or hear the soft creak of the stairs as she paced. She started opening her laptop again at the kitchen counter. Not because she'd let go of hiding, but because she wanted me to notice. She wanted me to see her doing normal things, to believe she had nothing to hide. Except now, there was nothing left to discover. I already knew it all, and she was starting to sense that. She asked questions more often. Is everything okay? You've been quiet lately. Did I do something? Each one was bait, a test, a thread she hoped I'd pull. I didn't. I answered like someone reading from a manual. Everything's fine. Just tired. No. And each time, something in her face sagged. Our friends started asking questions too. Subtle ones. Anna, her best friend, texted me asking if Amy was all right. Said she seemed off at their last coffee meetup. I played dumb. Said she was just stressed about work. Anna didn't reply. She'd started showing cracks in public. At a dinner with her parents, she knocked over a wine glass and froze like she'd shattered more than glass. Her dad made a joke about clumsiness. She forced a laugh, but she was shaking when she cleaned it up. Her mom kept glancing at me. I didn't offer anything. She started looking at me differently after that, like she wanted to ask something she couldn't voice in front of her daughter. Amy didn't bring up the incident afterward. She just went to bed early, face to the wall, breathing slow and strained. The following week, I began reclaiming space. I took her name off the car insurance policy and moved the car into my name alone. Legally, it had always been mine, but I hadn't updated the paperwork until now. She didn't notice. I started receiving her magazines and subscription boxes at a P.O. box I'd opened. I called and canceled each one. She stopped asking why the mail seemed thinner. The day she lost access to her fitness app, she spent an hour trying to reset the login before giving up. Must be a glitch, she mumbled. Yeah, I said, sipping my coffee. Technology's weird lately. The cracks became a network of fractures. Her voice, her gestures, her rhythm. Everything began to wobble. And then one morning, I noticed something new. She had packed a small overnight bag and left it by the door. Not hidden, not discussed, just there. A silent backup plan, a just in case. She didn't know I'd already started packing hers in secret.